Hey, this is Michael Lindsay for Vital MX. We're out here in North Carolina today at JGR-MX's private motocross facility for a really good reason. As we all know, they just announced a big partnership with Suzuki, and part of that is the new bike behind me. It's been the first time in 10 years that we have an all-new RM-Z450 to ride, so let's come out here to throw a few laps on it. So as a lot of you know, we went to Japan about 2 months ago almost now to check out the bike. We've got a huge article on everything new they've done with this. You can hit the link below or just scroll down and you should be able to find it. The biggest thing is Suzuki having an all-new chassis, swing arm, and bodywork this year. The bike finally visually looks different, which could worry a few people in the sense of the chassis and swing arm. That has been Suzuki's strong point, so it was really interesting to see them tackle that as one of the main all-new items on this bike. While the engine did get quite a few updates, they're mostly in the top end. The bottom end, the cases, transmission, crank, all that's a holdover from the previous year. And then from there, we have all new suspension components with Showa's 49A kit type fork, springless on both sides, no more air fork for Suzuki. And they're also the first manufacturer to come with Showa's BFRC balance-free rear cushion shock in production. So let's kick it off with what's improved first off. Chassis-wise, the bike's a lot thinner. You hear us say that about every bike every year, but that's what manufacturers are definitely going for. The new chassis is a lot thinner. They've thinned out all the bodywork. It feels a lot more, say, like the KTM or Husky between the legs. They've really done a great job of thinning it out all the way through the radiator shrouds and back to the side plates. They've kept it very consistent so it doesn't have any area on the bike that pops out, grabs your boot. One of the best bikes I've ridden for that with no real points that kind of hang up. Now down to how the bike actually feels to ride. So they did lose a little bit of weight between the frame, the swing arm, and a few other changes, but they also gained back weight with the spring fork. This sets the weight balance a little bit different on the bike. The Suzuki's already been really planned in the front, but they've changed the weight balance because of the added 3 pounds from the spring fork. It's a couple percent more towards the front end, so the bike has even more weight over the front. The actual seat profile feels a little bit lower, but it tapers up more in the back. It gave the bike a little bit of a stink bug feel when I first got on it this morning. Overall, we ended up coming back in, changing the sag a little bit. We lowered it another 3 or 4 millimeters just to try to kind of get that rear end down there so it didn't feel like it was tagging me all the time. Didn't feel like as I got farther back on the bike that the bike was actually taller. Now this wasn't a big deal, as I mentioned before, we have more weight bias on the front. The Suzuki still feels really planted up front. It feels a lot like the old bike in the sense of how much constant weight it has on the front end, how much feedback you have. The spring fork definitely is an improvement over the tack setting they were using the year before for actual feedback to the rider. The only thing that was kind of weird is also the front end was a little bit soft even at my weight. I went a little bit stiffer, mostly taking weight off the front end by sucking the sag down in the rear kind of helped that as well. Because before under heavy braking, you know, we've got really good dirt here back east, it would definitely suck the front end down in the stroke. It felt good at my weight for bottoming resistance, but it was mostly just a couple clicks to kind of keep it up in the stroke and just maintain more of a balance that the previous bike had that the new one didn't have first thing this morning. Now actually getting down to the rest of the suspension, big story is the BFRC unit in the rear. A lot of works teams have used this the past few years. It hasn't been as popular in the US versus Europe. That kind of comes down to the track differences, the type of chop, the acceleration. The BFRC shock, it transfers really evenly from compression to rebound. The shock feels very free, and because of that, it moves a lot. A lot of pros in the US prefer more of a dead feeling shock, mostly because of Supercross, so we haven't seen it here a lot. This production version kind of carries that same trait. It's very active. I would say the more hard pack sections you ride with square edge chop, the better it works because it settles down and accelerates better, and it settles between that chop. The more grip there is though, it's hard to keep it down in the stroke at times. Unless you can stay on the throttle and really keep the rear end of that bike loaded under power and off the back, it tends to climb out of the stroke a little bit as you're accelerating. So for me, I end up slowing down the rebound a little bit just to keep it down in the stroke when I was under power, or actually when I wasn't able to keep the power fully loaded. Like I said, I think the shock's gonna be give or take. Some guys are really gonna appreciate the free feeling on the more hard pack and the chatter. I think a lot of vet guys might appreciate it. Guys, like I said, that like to jump more, that like that dead feeling, they may have to make a few adjustments to get perfectly happy with it. Kicking over to the engine, the low to mid feels really typical of the Suzuki, kind of based off the past one. It runs really clean off the bottom. It's not the most powerful in the class. It's not weak by any means. It's smooth, it's very progressive. Where all the improvements really were made between the cylinder head, the new throttle body, the air box, the cams, was mostly mid to top. This bike really feels like it pulls a lot longer, which it needs to compete with, say, the Yamaha, the Honda, and the KTM, which have all gotten more 250-like power where they can keep building through the RPM range, where the previous Suzuki was more like your early fuel-injected 450s that really fell on its face late in the power around 9,000 or so. This one definitely pulls a lot better for the next around 2,000 or 3,000 RPM before it starts to taper off. Overall, it's not a massive change in the engine department, but it is a good step in the right direction, and there's definitely no negatives to what they did. So in the end, how big of a difference is the bike? As we kind of thought when we went through the info on the bike, the fact that it's the same weight, that there's not much change in the engine, there are a lot of characteristics that carry over from the old bike, which people will appreciate. In most of the sense, they have improved. I would say the chassis is definitely a better feel overall as you ride it. Like I said, the thing that bothers me a little bit is the stink bug feel. I was able to tweak it out here. It kind of depends on where you settle chassis balance, if you're able to run less sag, how you feel with that, because I feel like the seat tapers up more, so it may bother a few guys. I think the controversial point this year will be maybe in that BFRC shock. Me personally, I do like some of the characteristics. I think I can work with what it's added and easily get away from the takeaways, but some guys might struggle with it because it's definitely a new unit to tune and it's got quite a bit different feel than shocks we've been riding, say, the past 10 or 15 years. Overall, definitely some good improvements from Suzuki. Some stuff I'm a little bit on the fence about. We always say it when we ride back east, let's wait till we get back and ride some tracks we're used to. That mostly just comes down to how the dirt loads the bike. That really changes how you play with chassis balance. I might get it back west. I might actually take a little sag back out of it for more front end traction on hard pack. The shock might shine through more, might struggle with a little more. We'll see, that's what's fun. Shootouts are coming up in 2 weeks. We're gonna get started. So we'll get to see how all these 450s stack up. Stay tuned.